Richard Hale here. Something just changed. An administration that was boasting about deportation numbers every single day has suddenly gone quiet. The raids that dominated headlines, slowing down. The tough talk, softening. The messaging, completely different. That doesn't happen by accident. When a government abruptly shifts tone on its signature policy, it usually means one thing. Pressure is working. Political pressure, legal pressure, public pressure. Tonight, we're breaking down what triggered this shift, what it could mean for the midterms, and why this moment may be more fragile than it looks. If you care about protecting democracy and staying ahead of the tactics being used in real time, hit that like button and subscribe right now, because the story isn't over. It's evolving. Let's get into it. When a dictatorial government suddenly starts reversing its main policy, it's a clear sign that something significant has changed. This week, we witnessed Trump's deportation engine come to an abrupt and questionable stop. You might have seen it. The ICE raids, once making headlines daily, have suddenly gone silent. Kristi Noem, who was previously boasting about deportation figures and threatening to send agents to the Super Bowl, is now on a defensive media tour, stressing how they're adhering to the law and ensuring humane enforcement. The same administration that was separating families and flaunting arrest stats like sports scores is now quiet. Remember when they couldn't stop talking about the numbers? Now nothing. This isn't skill. This isn't strategy. It's panic. Much like Trump canceling the Super Bowl to avoid public jeering, his administration is scaling back operations because they know what's on the horizon. Legal accountability, public outcry, and a midterm disaster that could end his presidency as we know it. But before we cheer this withdrawal, we need to understand what caused it and what they plan to do next. Because authoritarians don't just give up, they regroup. They look for new battlefields. Right now, Trump's administration is diverting resources from deportation enforcement to something even more dangerous, manipulating the upcoming midterm elections. So, let's dissect what happened, why they're pulling back, and what we need to do right now to take advantage of this moment of weakness. Let's begin with what broke them. Minneapolis. Two American citizens, Maria Gonzalez and her brother Hector, were shot and killed by federal ICE agents who raided the wrong address. Not undocumented immigrants, not criminals. American citizens killed in their own home by agents who had the wrong house, refused to show a warrant, and opened fire when the family didn't immediately comply with commands shouted in English at 6 in the morning. And here's what's different about Minneapolis. Compared to numerous other documented abuses, the neighbors filmed everything. The Ring doorbell captured the audio. The cover-up attempt failed before it even started. ICE claimed the residents fired first until the body cam footage leaked, showing no weapon was ever found. They claimed they announced themselves until the doorbell footage proved they didn't. They claimed it was a lawful operation until the warrant showed it was for a completely different address 3 blocks away. The Minneapolis City Council acted immediately, passing emergency resolutions to limit ICE cooperation and demanding a federal investigation. The Minnesota Attorney General launched a state criminal investigation. Democratic members of Congress didn't just condemn it. They introduced specific legislation creating criminal penalties for federal agents who kill citizens during unlawful raids. And the family's attorneys filed a wrongful death lawsuit naming not just the agents, but Kristi Noem personally and the Department of Homeland Security. But Minneapolis wasn't an isolated incident. It was just the one captured clearly enough that even Trump's defenders couldn't spin it. We've documented wrong house raids in Chicago, Phoenix, and Houston. We've seen citizens arrested and held for days despite presenting birth certificates. We've watched agents operate without warrants, without identification, and without accountability until Minneapolis forced the accountability conversation into the mainstream. And as Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said this week, when federal agents can kill American citizens in their homes without consequence, We don't have law enforcement. We have state-sanctioned violence, and every single agent who participated in these operations needs to know that their actions are being documented for future prosecution. That's not rhetoric. That's a threat. And Trump's administration heard it loud and clear. Now, let's discuss what Trump's internal polling is likely showing him right now, because we have the public numbers, and they are absolutely disastrous for this administration. Trump's overall approval rating has plummeted to the lowest point of his presidency, sitting in the mid-30s in most reliable polls. But the issue-specific numbers are even worse. On immigration policy specifically, his approval is in the low 30s, with 62% of Americans disapproving of his deportation operations. And this is before most Americans even know about Minneapolis. But here's the number that should terrify Trump the most. Among Latino voters, his approval has dived from an already weak 38% at inauguration to just 22% today. That's a 16-point drop in 6 weeks. 16 points in a demographic that Republicans desperately need to remain even remotely competitive in states like Arizona, Nevada, Texas, and Florida. And we're not just seeing this in polls. We're seeing it in actual elections. Last month in Texas, a Democrat flipped a red state Senate seat, winning by 14 points in a district Trump carried by 17 points in 2024. That's a 31-point swing. In Georgia's special congressional election, Republicans held the seat, but their margin collapsed from +20 to +3. In Arizona's State House special election, Democrats flipped another seat with a 19-point swing. This is what a backlash looks like in real time. This is what happens when you push your mandate so hard down the country's throat that they start gagging on it. And we know Trump's team is seeing these numbers because of how they're acting. The sudden messaging shift, the quiet deportation slowdown, the defensive media tours. You don't go from bragging to hiding unless your internal numbers are screaming at you to stop. But it's not just the polls that have them rattled. It's the courts. Because here's a number that should give everyone hope. In the last 6 weeks, federal courts have blocked Trump administration policies at a 96% success rate when states or civil rights groups have requested injunctions. Let me say that again, 96%. In just the last 3 weeks alone, federal courts have blocked the mass denaturalization program in the Ninth Circuit, the elimination of due process protections for asylum seekers in the Second Circuit, the warrantless home raid protocols in the District of Minnesota, the defunding of sanctuary cities in the Northern District of California, and the deployment of military personnel for domestic immigration enforcement in the D.C. Circuit. Trump is losing in court constantly, overwhelmingly, and every single one of these losses creates legal precedent that constrains his power and creates documentation for future accountability. Because here's what a lot of people don't understand. These aren't just policy losses. These are potential criminal cases being built in real time. When a federal judge rules that ICE conducted unlawful raids, that's documentation of civil rights violations. When a federal judge finds that agents operated outside their authority, that's documentation of abuse of power. When a federal judge determines that the administration defied court orders, that's documentation of contempt. And all of that documentation sits there waiting for the next administration's Department of Justice to pick up and use for criminal prosecution. Kristi Noem might be Secretary of Homeland Security today, but she won't be forever. Trump might be president today, but he won't be forever. And when Democrats take back the White House, that DOJ will have 6 years of documented civil rights violations, unlawful raids, wrongful deaths, and contempt of court just sitting there waiting to be prosecuted. This is why Democrats in Congress are being so specific about documentation right now. This is why Jaime Raskin laid it out perfectly in this week's oversight hearing. I just want to remind people that Kristi Noem won't be secretary forever. Donald Trump won't be president forever, suggesting that 3 years from now or so, we could have a Democratic president. We could have a new Attorney General. That Justice Department would be empowered to conduct real criminal investigations of these shootings, of these beatings, and of these arrests. This is the language of prosecutors building a case. Rashin isn't just grandstanding. He's putting agents on notice that their actions are being documented for future prosecution. He's telling Noam and Stephen Miller and every ICE agent who participated in unlawful raids, "We're watching you, we're recording this, and when we regain power, you will be held accountable. We're going to have real attorney generals again. We are going to have a real Justice Department again. We are going to restore, and we're going to fortify and improve the rule of law." And this is why Trump is already talking about canceling the midterms, because he knows if he loses Congress, the investigation apparatus turns on immediately. Subpoenas, hearings, oversight. And if he loses in 2028, the prosecution apparatus turns on. Criminal investigations, grand juries, indictments. Trump's not just trying to avoid political embarrassment, he's trying to avoid prison. And so is everyone around him. So now let's discuss what they're doing instead. Because remember, I told you weeks ago that we were only a few polling points away from Trump, just openly suggesting he should cancel the midterms. Well, we're not quite there yet, but the machinery for stealing them is already being assembled. Just this week, Trump met with Republican secretaries of state from swing states at the White House. The official agenda was election integrity. The real agenda was pressure. We know this because two secretaries of state from Pennsylvania and Michigan refused to attend, and publicly stated they wouldn't participate in efforts to undermine legitimate elections. At the Republican National Committee, they've installed election deniers in key positions, and they're recruiting what they call election integrity poll monitors, which is just code for intimidation squads to challenge legitimate voters and create chaos that justifies not certifying results. In Georgia, the state legislature is rushing through bills that would allow the state election board, which Trump allies now control, to refuse to certify county results they deem irregular. In Arizona, they're purging voter rolls at unprecedented rates, targeting predominantly Latino neighborhoods. In Wisconsin, they're restricting early voting locations in Milwaukee and Madison while expanding them in rural Republican counties. This is the playbook. And remember, Trump already tried this in 2020. He called Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger and said, and this is a direct quote, "I just want you to find me 1180 votes." That wasn't Trump trying to stop election fraud. That was Trump trying to commit election fraud. Now remember the gerrymandering push from earlier this year? Trump pressured red states to redraw congressional maps mid-decade. Texas did it. Missouri did it. But then Indiana Republicans told him to take a hike. California responded with defensive gerrymandering. Virginia might flip blue and redraw their maps. And when all is said and done, the gerrymandering war ended in basically a wash, maybe even net benefiting Democrats because Trump started the fight. So if they can't gerrymander their way to victory, and they can't deport their way to popularity, what's left? Stealing the election outright, prepositioning the machinery to refuse to certify legitimate Democratic victories, creating enough chaos and confusion that they can claim the results are illegitimate. And if all else fails, having Republican state legislators simply override the voters and send their own electors. This is why we can't let the deportation retreat lull us into complacency. They're not backing down. They're just shifting resources to a different battle space, the election itself. And you can see the propaganda pivot happening in real time because suddenly right-wing media has changed its tune on immigration enforcement. 3 weeks ago, Fox News was celebrating every raid. They were showing arrest numbers like they were stock market gains. They were interviewing ICE agents who bragged about how many families they'd separated. Stephen Miller was doing victory laps, talking about Liberation Day and reconquest. Now they're emphasizing humane enforcement. Now they're talking about following the law and targeting criminals only. Now they're memory holding all the footage of agents raiding schools and churches and hospitals. Now they're acting like Minneapolis was just an unfortunate accident, just one bad apple, rather than the inevitable result of unleashing federal agents with unlimited authority and zero accountability. They're trying to memory hole the cruelty before the midterms. They're trying to make you forget Minneapolis before November. They're trying to convince swing voters that actually Trump's immigration policy is reasonable and measured and nothing to be concerned about, which is exactly why we have to keep Minneapolis in the national conversation, why we have to keep showing up at ICE facilities with cameras rolling, why we have to keep documenting every unlawful raid, every civil rights violation, every abuse of power, because they're counting on you forgetting. They're counting on the news cycle moving on. They're counting on exhaustion and resignation and acceptance. We can't let them count on that. So, let's actually catalog what forced this retreat, because I want you to understand this wasn't inevitable. This wasn't automatic. This happened because people organized and resisted and fought back. Here's the resistance record. Number 1, community organizing. Sanctuary city policies held. Despite Trump's threats, despite his attempts to defund cities, Chicago and New York and Los Angeles and Seattle kept their sanctuary protections in place. Churches opened their doors. Schools refused to cooperate. Communities built rapid response networks. Number 2, legal challenges. That 96% injunction success rate didn't happen by accident. It happened because civil rights lawyers worked around the clock filing emergency motions, because state attorneys general coordinated legal strategies, because public defenders showed up for people who couldn't afford representation. Number 3, public pressure. Remember Batman, Guy, the activist who showed up to the Santa Clara City Council meeting in a Batman costume and shamed them into banning ICE from the Super Bowl? That worked. Airport blockades that stopped deportation flights, those worked. Protests outside ICE detention centers that drew media attention, those worked. Number 4, electoral consequences. Those special election swings I mentioned, those are real. But politicians are seeing what happens when you align yourself with Trump's cruelty. They're losing winnable races, and that creates pressure on other Republicans to distance themselves. Number 5, documentation. Every raid filmed, every abuse recorded, every unlawful action caught on camera. That created an evidence trail that courts could use, that prosecutors can eventually use, and that the public could see with their own eyes. Number 6, Democratic unity. This one surprised me, honestly, but Democrats in Congress have been more unified in their opposition than I expected. Progressive and moderate Democrats voting together on immigration protections, state and federal Democrats coordinating on legal strategy. That unity matters. Trump canceled the Super Bowl because he couldn't handle booing. Now he's canceling raids because he can't handle accountability. Same energy, same weakness, same result when we push back. The lesson here is simple. Resistance works. Not always immediately, not always completely, but it works. But here's what Trump will never understand. And here's what his entire naive worldview blinds him to. Immigration built this country. Immigration sustains this country. Immigration will grow this country. 40% of Fortune 500 companies were founded by immigrants or children of immigrants. Immigrants start businesses at twice the rate of native-born Americans. Immigrants are overrepresented among doctors, nurses, engineers, and scientists. They're essential workers in agriculture, construction, and hospitality. They pay billions in taxes, including undocumented immigrants who pay into Social Security and Medicare, but can't collect benefits. But beyond the economic case, there's a moral case. We don't judge Americanness by where you were born. We judge it by your commitment to our shared values: freedom, equality, opportunity, justice. If you believe in those things and you're willing to fight for them, you're as American as anyone born here. Trump's vision is fear, deportation, family separation, walls, camps, cruelty as deterrent. Our vision is comprehensive immigration reform, pathway to citizenship for dreamers and essential workers, family reunification, humane asylum processing, border security that doesn't require barbarism, his polls cratering, our momentum building. And that brings us to what we need to do right now. I told you to prepare for Trump suggesting midterm cancellation. That's still coming. Maybe not this week, maybe not this month, but it's coming. And when it does, we can't be caught flat-footed. Here's what you need to do right now. Number 1, election protection. Register as a poll worker in your county. Most election offices are desperate for workers, and having people who actually believe in democracy working the polls is essential. Join local election protection coalitions. Every swing state has them. Know your Secretary of State's emergency contact information. Know what the process is for challenging illegal voter intimidation. Number 2, documentation. Keep filming ICE operations. Keep recording school board meetings where they try to restrict what teachers can say about immigration. Keep documenting threats to election workers. Your phone is a weapon. Use it. Number 3, organizing. Special elections keep happening between now and November. Volunteer for local races. Virginia's state elections are this year. New Jersey has legislative races. Your city council, your school board, your county commission. Those races matter, and they're happening soon. Voter registration deadlines are approaching in most states. Register voters help people update their addresses. Make sure college students know how to vote where they go to school. Number 4, narrative control. When someone says Trump's not that bad, you say Minneapolis. When someone says Democrats are weak, you cite that 96% court win rate. When someone says my vote doesn't matter, you show them that 31-point swing in the Texas special election. Control the narrative with facts, with receipts, with evidence. Here's what I want you to understand about this moment. They're retreating on deportations not because they found their conscience, not because they suddenly care about civil rights or human dignity or the Constitution. They're retreating because we made it too costly to continue legally, politically and reputationally too costly, and that matters because authoritarians need to look strong. That's their entire brand. They govern through intimidation and fear and the appearance of unstoppable power. Every time we force them to retreat, we don't just win tactically, we win psychologically. We prove they're weak, we prove they can be beaten, and weak authoritarians don't last. Trump knows the midterms are his firewall against accountability. Lose the House and Senate, and he faces investigations, subpoenas, impeachment. Lose the White House in 2028, and he faces criminal prosecution. We know the midterms are our path to justice. Win the House and Senate, and we restore oversight. Win the White House in 2028, and we restore the rule of law. So, they're going to cheat. We're going to organize. They're going to suppress. We're going to mobilize. They're going to lie. We're going to document. And based on what we've accomplished in just 6 weeks since inauguration, the court wins, the special elections, the policy retreats, the community resistance. I like our chances. We're going to keep calling it out on this show. Keep bringing you the wins, the threats, and the tactics you need. If you want to support this work, hit that subscribe button. Leave a like on this video for the algorithm. If you stuck around to the end, drop a blue heart in the comments so I know you're ready to fight. Keep fighting. Don't let them silence you. And remember, they're retreating because we're advancing. Until next time, I'll see you.